Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the quietest, most precisely engineered silences in American history, the one built around 1950s mothers who were drowning inside houses that smelled like fresh paint and looked from the outside absolutely fine. Not a battlefield silence, not a political silence, the kind that lives inside a compact mirror checked at the clothesline before the children can see your face. Tap the like button and subscribe if a quiet, careful, slowly paced history is the kind of thing you want at this hour. It really does help. Tonight's topic came in from one of you in the comments a few weeks ago, and I want to say a proper, specific thank you for it. This one needed to be said. Pull the blanket a little closer to your chin if it isn't there already. Tell me in the comments where you are tonight and what hour it is on your clock, and if she's still around, to ask what your grandmother said about 1955, or what she pointedly didn't. Switch the lamp off, push a pillow under your head, settle the comforter into the right shape, and let the room go quiet, but maybe don't open the McCalls on your nightstand. It'll just tell you to be more grateful. Have you ever wondered what happened when an entire medical system decided that what you were feeling wasn't a condition? It was a personality flaw? How did 300,000 women a year move through that feeling without a single word for it? What does a suburb actually do to a person when the streets curve just enough that you can't see the next house and there's no sidewalk anyway? Could you survive a 6-week postpartum checkup in which the doctor examined your uterus, declared you healed, and sent you home without asking a single question about your mind? Did the magazines help, or did they just run another feature on how to make your casserole look more festive? The compact mirror. What exactly were you checking for, and who taught you to check? And what happens to a feeling that has no name, no diagnosis, and no one in the room willing to say it out loud? Congratulations. You just woke up in Levittown, New York, 1955. The house is 800 square feet and smells like lumber and something sweet that hasn't aired out yet. The street curves away in both directions and there is no sidewalk, which means there is nowhere to walk to, which means you are not going anywhere. The car left at 7. Good luck. You sit at the vanity at 6:45 in the morning. The baby is in the bassinet behind you. The husband is still in the kitchen, 10 minutes from leaving. You open the compact and you start with the pancake foundation, because the skin under your eyes is the colour of skim milk and you've not slept in 11 weeks. The mirror is small and round and tilted. You apply the cream first, then the powder, then the lipstick, in the order the magazine recommended in March. The cream is called 8 Hour. That's also how long the husband will be gone. Tangy lipstick comes next. It goes on pale and shifts to something warmer once it meets your skin. The label calls this a natural flush, which implies you have one. The bullet has been worn down to roughly the size of a baby tooth. You press your lips together twice. The woman in the compact looks back at you, assembled and approximate, the way a stage set looks correct from 40 feet, but has no back wall. This is not vanity, it's load-bearing infrastructure. The face has to hold from 6:55, when the car backs out of the drive, until roughly the same time this evening, when it pulls back in. Let's talk about the car. It's not a car. It's a clock. It leaves at dawn and the day begins and it returns at dusk, and the performance ends and the hours between are yours to manage without a stage direction or an audience that would notice the difference. Levittown streets curve gently, without sidewalks, in a way that suggests walking somewhere was never really the point. The nearest grocery store requires the car. The nearest neighbour requires a reason. The nearest phone capable of reaching your mother in Cleveland costs $1.35 for 3 minutes, which is about $15 of today's money per conversation, which is a pricing structure designed to make homesickness feel like a luxury. You finish with Elizabeth Arden's 8-hour cream along the outer corners of your eyes, where the sleeplessness shows most clearly. A neighbour named Patty does the same thing every morning, though you don't know that yet. Patty applies her pancake with a damp sponge in small, careful and oddly devotional circular strokes, the way you'd seal an envelope that contained something you weren't sure about. She pats the powder down after with 3 firm taps. Then she goes downstairs and makes breakfast and doesn't mention it to anyone. McCall's is on the side table, folded open to the March issue. McCall's called it togetherness. In 1954, small t, big concept. A family life centered on shared domestic purpose, warmth, and a kitchen that smelled like something worthwhile was always on the stove. The photographs showed women who looked, in the soft, even, professionally lit way of catalogue wives, like they'd slept. The copy assumed you felt grateful and just needed a better casserole to prove it. There was no editorial on the subject of crying quietly in the bathroom while the baby napped. That column did not exist. Dr. Spock's baby book was the second best-selling book in American history by 1952, behind only the Bible, which is quite a lot of competition for childcare advice. It ran to hundreds of pages. It covered feeding schedules, fever management, the correct emotional distance between parent and infant. It devoted almost no pages to the mother, on the assumption that the mother arrived pre-assembled and required no instruction herself. The baby was the subject. You were the environment. You close the compact. The click is small and definitive. The baby makes a sound. The husband's chair scrapes back in the kitchen. You put the compact in the top drawer, under a folded handkerchief, and you stand up and you go downstairs and you begin. You stand at the kitchen window with the coffee, and you watch the Buick back out of the driveway. The husband waves once. The garage door comes down. The car is gone now until 6:15 tonight, which is 11 hours and 15 minutes from where you are standing. You do not have a driver's license. The grocery store is 2 miles away. The closest bus stop is 1.25. The baby is starting to stir in the other room. The Buick weighs approximately 4,000 pounds. It is between 7 a.m. and 6:15 p.m. The heaviest thing missing from the house. Let's talk about the street. It curves. Not dramatically gently, in a way that feels almost thoughtful, like it was designed by someone who wanted you to feel enclosed without being able to say why. Levittown's planners built 17,447 houses on roads that bend just enough to prevent a straight sightline to anything useful. No sidewalks. The streets belong to cars, and the cars belong to husbands, and the husbands are currently merging onto the parkway. The grass between the houses is well maintained. The grass doesn't help. Your mother is in Philadelphia. Her mother is in Cleveland. There is a telephone in the kitchen, attached to the wall by a cord that reaches approximately nowhere useful. A 3-minute call to Philadelphia costs $1.35, which is roughly what the baby's cereal costs for the week. You pick up the phone and put it back down. You'll call on Sunday when the rates drop. By Sunday you will have forgotten what you meant to say, or you'll have remembered that she'll worry, and worrying her is its own kind of cost. The neighbour across the yard is named Carol. Carol has 2 children and a very consistent smile, and she came over on Tuesday with a coffee cake wrapped in wax paper. This was generous. This was also the first adult human you had spoken to in 4 days who was not your husband or the paediatrician's receptionist. Carol asked how you were settling in. You said fine, which is a complete sentence in 1955, and Carol nodded like it was the correct answer, which it was, and moved on across the yard, the smile still in place. You watched her go. The cake was good. You ate all of it that afternoon and felt, briefly, something that wasn't numbness. The baby is fully awake now. You know this before you hear the cry because the house has only so many rooms, and you have memorized the quality of its silences. You go in. You lift her. She weighs what she weighs, 6 weeks, 8 pounds, 4 ounces at last check, and she stops crying because you are there, which is the thing about babies. They stop when you appear. They have no idea what it costs to appear. By 10 o'clock, the ironing basket is watching you from the corner of the living room. It doesn't blink. It has the focused, patient, mildly offended posture of something that knows it isn't going anywhere. It is full, square, and quietly authoritative. It is roughly the size of a medium dog with no intention of leaving. The basket arrived full on Monday. The basket will be full again by Thursday regardless of what you do to it between now and then, because that is the nature of the ironing basket, which is less a chore than a philosophical position the household has taken. You iron 3 shirts, you put the iron down, you pick the baby up again. The afternoon is the thing nobody warned you about. Not the exhaustion everyone warned you about the exhaustion, not the baby you knew about the baby. It's the hours between 2 and 5 that arrive each day like a weather system with its own pressure and its own specific quality of light. The soap opera on the television ends. The next one starts. Outside, the street is empty in the way that suburbs are empty, which is different from the way cities are empty. A city empty means everyone left. A suburb empty means everyone is exactly where they're supposed to be, behind their own walls, in their own houses, managing their own afternoons without making a sound about it. You are doing the same thing. You are doing it very quietly. The baby sleeps at 3. You stand in the backyard with the laundry basket, and you hang the sheets, and somewhere during the second sheet you are crying, and you finish the sheet, and you check your face in the compact mirror you keep in your apron pocket for exactly this reason. You look presentable. The pancake holds. You go inside before anyone can see, which is easy because there's no one on the street to see it, which is the only way the street is useful today. You are in a 4-bed maternity ward at St. Mary's. You have been here for 6 days. The discharge is scheduled for day 9, possibly day 10 if the incision is slow. A nurse named Eleanor brings the baby in every 4 hours. A different nurse takes the baby back out. Between feedings, there is nothing. You are not allowed to walk in the hallway alone. The other 3 mothers in the ward sleep, or pretend to. You have been crying since Tuesday, and no one has asked you why. The ward has a schedule. 6 a.m. breakfast tray, 7 a.m. baby, 8 a.m. doctor rounds. The doctor stops at the foot of your bed, looks at the chart, looks at you, says, "Everything healing nicely," and moves on. The appointment takes 45 seconds. He has 4 more beds, and then a full day ahead of him, and what he means by everything is the incision. The incision is fine. The incision is not the problem. He doesn't ask about the problem because the problem isn't on the chart. Let's talk about the chart. It has your blood pressure, your temperature, your fluid intake, your output, a level of bureaucratic attention to your body that will never again be replicated in your medical life. What it doesn't have is a row for how you feel. Not because anyone decided to leave it out. Because in 1952, the DSM-I was published, and postpartum depression was not in it. The diagnosis didn't exist. You can't be suffering from something that hasn't been named yet. You're just a woman in a hospital bed who has been crying since Tuesday, and that, apparently, is a weather condition. Eleanor is brisk, capable, and reliably uncurious. Eleanor brings the baby in a blanket rolled tight as a burrito, hands him across without breaking stride, and is already writing something on her clipboard before she reaches the door. She comes back in 4 hours. She doesn't ask if you need anything between now and then because the schedule is what you need. The schedule is very sure of this. The schedule does not ask follow-up questions. The other women in the ward are managing better, or performing better. It's hard to tell, and by day 6 you've stopped trying to distinguish the two. The woman in the bed by the window, whose name is probably Patricia based on the flowers, has visitors every afternoon who laugh at normal volume and eat the good chocolates. She holds the baby the way people hold babies in photographs, confident, upright, like she already knew how. You hold yours like someone handed you an object from a country you've never visited, and the customs are unclear. On day 8, a social worker comes by. This is progress. This is 1953, and someone is about to ask how you're doing. She sits in the chair beside your bed, opens a folder, and asks whether you have adequate household help arranged for when you get home, whether your husband has taken any days off work, and whether you'd like a pamphlet about breastfeeding. You say yes to the pamphlet. She writes something down and leaves. The pamphlet is 8 pages. 7 of them are about the baby. The 6-week postpartum appointment exists, and you will go to it, and it will last about 12 minutes. The doctor will check the uterus return to size, good check the incision healed well, good, and ask if you have any questions. You won't have any questions. You'll have one question, but it won't feel like a question you're allowed to ask. It'll feel like something you should already know the answer to. You smile in the right places. He marks the chart, normal postpartum recovery. You are discharged back into your life. The hospital stay was actually the longest break you'll get. 7 to 10 days of someone else cooking, someone else doing the laundry, someone else waking at 3 a.m. for a reason other than you. None of this is framed as rest. It's framed as recovery. The distinction matters because rest implies you were tired, and tired implies something was wrong, and nothing is wrong. You have a healthy baby and a healed incision and a pamphlet about breastfeeding and a car waiting outside, and the car is facing the highway, and the highway goes to Levittown, and Levittown is home now. You check the compact mirror before you get in the car. Habit already. The mirror doesn't say anything. It just shows you what you're working with. You arrive home on day 10 with the baby and a small canvas bag. Your husband carries the bag in. He sets it on the kitchen counter. He kisses you on the forehead, and he says he has to be back at the office by 1. The screen door swings closed. The car pulls out. You are standing in your own living room holding a 6-day-old infant. The living room is silent in a particular way, a way that was not silent a week ago. Your mother lives in Pennsylvania. That is 6 hours by train. The house smells like fresh paint and new lumber and cut grass baking in the sun. It is a good smell. Everyone says it is a good smell. The GI Bill made this house possible. 2.4 million suburban homes by 1956, each one financed and graded and planted with a small identical shrub, and yours is 810 square feet of everything you were supposed to want. There are no sidewalks on your street. The street curves gently in a way that discourages walking anywhere in particular. You will learn this about the street. Let's talk about the silence. It is not the silence of rest. It is the silence of a house that has been empty during the hours it was supposed to have people in it, and has never quite adjusted to having them. The baby makes noise, but noise and company are not the same thing, as you will spend the next several months discovering. Your nearest neighbour is a woman named Donna, who has 2 children under 4 and a retriever that barks at the mail. Donna seems fine. She always seems fine. This is the first thing you notice about your street. Everyone seems fine. The ironing basket is already waiting. You don't remember leaving it there. The basket has opinions about this reunion, none of them warm. Your mother's sister used to live 4 streets away from where you grew up. Your grandmother lived in the upstairs apartment. A cousin was usually passing through. None of that geometry exists in Levittown, which was not designed for grandmothers and cousins. It was designed for a husband, a wife, 2.2 children, and a single-car garage that the husband uses at 6:45 in the morning. The car leaves. The car returns at dusk. Between those 2 events, the house belongs entirely to you and the infant and the ironing basket, which has said nothing sympathetic since you got home. A long-distance call to your mother in Pennsylvania costs $1.35 for 3 minutes, which is roughly $15 in any currency that feels real. You make the calls anyway. Your mother says the baby sounds beautiful. She says you sound tired. She says it gets easier. The line crackles. 3 minutes end. You hold the receiver for a moment after she's gone, the way you hold a door that has already closed. Now here is what happens between 2 and 5 in the afternoon. The baby sleeps. The soap opera ends. The house produces a specific quality of light that is neither afternoon nor evening, and the silence inside it has texture. You sit on the couch and you are aware of the fact that you are sitting on the couch, and that awareness is somehow the heaviest part. Doctor. Spock's book is on the side table, second best-selling book in American history, behind the Bible, which is also on the side table, and it tells you a great deal about your infant's development and almost nothing about yours. The book runs to 627 pages. You are in very few of them. Margaret from 3 houses down knocks on Friday morning with a coffee cake wrapped in wax paper. She is warm, polite, and entirely incurious. She stands in your doorway with the kind of cheerfulness that looks like it was applied earlier, the same way you applied the pancake and the tangy before your husband left. She says the baby is beautiful. She says you look wonderful. You smile, and the smile holds in place like something load-bearing. Margaret smiles back. She has to get back. The cake is good. You eat it standing over the sink at 2 in the afternoon, and it tastes like texture. The baby blues, the doctor told you, last 3 to 5 days. That is the official window, a drop in estrogen and progesterone, completely normal, resolved by the end of the first week. It is now day 12. You file this information away without comment. The filing system is getting full. You count the days on the wall calendar in the kitchen. The baby is 2 weeks old. 2 weeks ago, the nurse on the ward told you the sadness was normal, and it would lift in 3 to 5 days. The way it lifts for everyone. The way the obstetrics book describes it. The hormones drop, the tears come, the tears stop. It has been 14 days. The tears have not stopped. The calendar does not have a square for that. Neither does the book. Doctor. Lawrence on the ward used the phrase baby blues as twice, both times reading off the chart. The chart had boxes for blood pressure, incision, nursing, and sleep. He checked the box for sleep. The discharge sheet was a single page, the pediatrician's address, a note about fluids, fresh air on dry days. He folded it once and handed it across the bed rail. Helene Deutsch's textbook sits on Doctor. Lawrence's shelf, second from the right, the spine creased at the chapter on motherhood. published in 1945, taught to the generation of physicians who are now examining you. The chapter explains that maternal depression is neurotic resistance to a biologically destined role. The footnotes are very sure of themselves. The woman in Dr. Lawrence's exam room rarely is. Your 6-week postpartum appointment is next Thursday. You've been thinking about it. The doctor will check the uterus. He'll check the incision. He'll ask how the feeding is going. He is one of the 94% of American physicians in 1950 who are men. And he has a particular way of asking how you're feeling with a slight forward lean, pen already moving, answer already anticipated. The correct answer is tired but well. You've rehearsed tired but well. You could say it in your sleep, if you were sleeping. Marjorie Phelps, who lives 3 houses down and had her second in March, tells you at the Thursday coffee clatch that she cried every morning for 6 weeks after her first. She says it while refilling your cup, not looking at you, the way you'd mention a crack in a sidewalk informational, requiring no response. Then she says she just pushed through. She says this with the flat certainty of someone who has decided that pushing through is a personality trait rather than a coping strategy with consequences. You nod. You hold the cup with both hands because your hands have been cold since the delivery, which the doctor said was normal, which the doctor said was circulation. The face takes about 12 minutes. Pancake foundation goes on flat, smooth, and slightly chalky. Tangy lipstick goes on second. A small amount of 8-hour cream under the eyes goes on last. The cream is called 8-hour. That's also how long he was gone. You have been awake since 4 in the morning. You have a basket of ironing that has not gotten smaller in 2 weeks, dinner to start by 5, and a face to put on before the car pulls into the driveway. You put the compact back in the drawer next to the sink, next to the baby's vitamins, and you go check on the baby, and you are fine. You are fine for the rest of the evening. You are fine at dinner, where the pot roast has a taste you understand conceptually. You are fine when he tells you about the office. You're fine when the baby wakes at 11, at 2, at 4:30. The fine is structural. It holds the same way a house holds, not because nothing is wrong, but because the walls are still up and nothing has visibly moved. The calendar in the kitchen has squares for every other thing. Formula, pediatrician, his mother's visit. The sadness doesn't need a square. It lives between them. You sit on the exam table at 6 weeks postpartum. The paper crinkles when you shift. Dr. Hennessy looks at the chart, presses 2 fingers along the incision, asks you to lie back. The exam takes 4 minutes. He tells you everything looks excellent and writes a note for the file. He asks if you have any questions. You have 11 questions. You have rehearsed them in the car. The one you ask is whether the swelling is normal. The swelling is normal. Doctor. Hennessy has answered this one before. He is writing before you finish the sentence. The other 10 questions stay in the car, where they will wait through October and most of November, getting slightly heavier. Let's talk about what the 6-week visit is actually checking. The uterus, the incision, your blood pressure, briefly. The form has 2 columns, and both of them are about the body below your waist. There is no third column. The form was not designed in a hurry, it was designed this way on purpose, by men who agreed about what mattered, and what mattered fit on one page. Women were 6% of American physicians in 1950, which means almost every doctor asking how you feel is a man who has never felt this way and is waiting for the correct answer. Dr. Hennessy is not cruel. He is thorough within the available definition of thorough. He will shake your hand on the way out. The handshake is warm. It is also the end of the appointment. You have been awake in rotating 4-hour intervals for 6 weeks. You have eaten dinner 5 nights this week while tasting nothing, food arriving as texture only, flavour having left sometime in August without a note. You cry most days between 2 and 5 in the afternoon, quiet, regular and roughly punctual, which is also when the soap opera is on, which is convenient. Nora Hutchings, your next-door neighbour, cried at the same hour for 3 months in 1952 and never mentioned it to anyone, and you will never know this about her. Doctor, Hennessy asks, on his way to the door, if you're getting enough rest. You say you're doing fine. He nods. He was going to nod either way. The nod is not diagnostic. It's just the shape the exit takes. You are discharged back into the house, the ironing basket, the baby, and the particular silence of Tuesday afternoons in a development where the streets curve just enough that you can't see the next intersection from your front step. The DSM-I, published in 1952, had categories for what you're experiencing. Not good ones, not accurate ones. What you have might be filed as psychotic depressive reaction, which sounds considerably worse than what it is, or involutional melancholia, which sounds like a 19th century weather condition. Neither name would help you. The name wouldn't come a real one, a useful one, for 35 more years. The Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale arrived in 1987. You are in 1956. Edinburgh is not happening for you. Meanwhile, Helene Deutsch's 1945 textbook is still on the shelf in Dr. Hennessy's office, possibly in spirit if not in fact. It taught a generation of psychiatrists that maternal depression was neurotic resistance to a biologically destined role, which is a way of saying, the problem is not the situation. The problem is that you are insufficiently committed to the situation. The book has been in medical school curricula for a decade. The book has opinions about you that it formed before you were even pregnant. You drive home. The car smells like vinyl and the particular warmth of a closed vehicle in October sun. You check your face in the compact mirror at the stoplight the pancake has held, mostly, which is the best you can ask of anything right now. The light changes. The house is 4 minutes away. The baby is with Mrs. Calloway from 2 streets over, who charges $1.50 and doesn't ask questions, which is exactly what you need from a person right now. Everything looks excellent. It says so in the file. You keep Spock on the kitchen shelf next to the radio. The cover is blue. The book is 627 pages long, and you have underlined sections in the early chapters about feeding schedules, croup, and the introduction of solids. There is a chapter on bowel movements. There is a chapter on toilet training. There is no chapter on you. The index does not contain the word mother, except as a noun the baby will eventually say. By 1952, the book had sold 750,000 copies. By the end of the decade, it would become the second best-selling book in American history, trailing only the Bible. Dr. Benjamin Spock had opinions about teething, about thumb-sucking, about the correct emotional temperature of discipline. He had very little to say about the woman holding the book at 2 p.m, in a house that smells like new paint and warm formula, who hasn't tasted her food in 6 weeks and can't explain why. The cover is blue, the spine is creased, and the author photograph is warm, paternal, and reassuringly tweed-jacketed. Doctor. Benjamin Spock looks at you from the inside flap the way a doctor in a magazine ad looks at you with a patience that implies he will answer all your questions in the order they arise. The book then proceeds to answer the baby's questions and not yours. Nancy Elaine Horvath, on the other side of Elm Terrace, has her copy rubber-banded open to page 212. She references it the way some people reference a lawyer, not frequently, but with the understanding that the lawyer is always right. She flips to the feeding schedule section with one hand while the other hand holds the baby, and she does this with the practiced efficiency of someone who has stopped expecting the book to flip back to her. Doctor. Spock's silence on the mother's mind wasn't accidental. Helene Deutsch had settled the question for the profession 7 years earlier. Her 1945 textbook on the psychology of women had shaped a generation of psychiatric training, and her position was clean. Maternal depression was neurotic resistance to a biologically destined role. The woman who struggled wasn't sick. She was reluctant. The DSM-I agreed by omission. It offered no specific entry, only vague categories that required a severity no one would let you reach before suggesting you simply adjust your attitude. So the 627 pages are about the baby's gas, the baby's milestones, the baby's emerging sense of self. The baby arrives in the book as a complete subject with interior states worth documenting. You arrive as a set of instructions, feed at these intervals, do not overstimulate, try to remain calm, your anxiety transfers. That sentence is in the book. Your exhaustion is not. Page 311 has a paragraph on the importance of a calm household. Page 344 mentions, in passing, that the baby will pick up on tension. The advice is consistent, soothing, and weirdly anatomical about the mother. Keep the voice low, keep the hands warm, keep the routine steady. You are described, when you are described, the way the manual for a thermostat describes a thermostat. The baby has weather. You are the climate it occurs in. You close the book, you put it back on the shelf. It sits next to the radio with the calm authority of something that has already had the last word. Outside, the street curves away from the house in a direction that doesn't lead anywhere in particular. The ironing basket on the floor has the same number of items in it that it had this morning. The baby is asleep. You are not sure what you are. The Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, the first standardized tool for identifying what you're experiencing, will be developed in 1987. That's 31 years from now. The book on the shelf will still be there. You bring the baby to Dr. Marcus on Tuesday at 10. The waiting room has 3 plastic chairs and a copy of highlights from 1953. The appointment lasts 12 minutes. The doctor measures the head, weighs the body, asks about feeding, asks about sleeping, asks about stools. He does not look at you. He is not unkind. He is precisely as attentive to the baby as the manual instructs. The baby is the patient. You are the transportation. The pediatric appointment was designed, from the ground up, to monitor one body, the small one. The large one who carried it here, who has not slept properly in 11 weeks, who cried in the car on the way and fixed her face in the compact mirror at the red light on Elm, that body has an appointment elsewhere. Theoretically, the 6-week postpartum visit already happened. The uterus was checked. The incision was inspected. The doctor said everything looks good and moved on to his next patient. That was the whole visit. Everything looks good is not a question. Doctor, Marcus does ask, at the end, almost as a formality, how you're holding up. The phrase is specifically holding up, not how are you, because holding up already contains its own expected answer, which is fine, just tired, you know how it is. You say fine, just tired, you know how it is. He nods. He writes something in the chart. It is almost certainly about the baby. Dr. Marcus is the statistical rule, not the exception. Women are 6% of American physicians in 1950, which is small, round, and easy to remember. He has read his Helene Deutsch. He has the standard textbook on the standard shelf next to the standard medical journal. Across the desk from him, you have 11 weeks of broken sleep, a quiet leak of tears between 2 and 5, and a face that has been re-pancaked twice today. Neither of you is going to bring any of this up. Bringing it up is not on the form. A nurse named Patricia hands you a pamphlet on the way out. It covers infant feeding schedules and a chart for tracking bowel movements. There is a small cartoon of a smiling baby at the top. Patricia has a practiced warmth that takes exactly 4 seconds and covers the distance from her desk to the door. She does not hand you a second pamphlet. There is no second pamphlet. The next appointment is in a month. You write it in the small calendar on the refrigerator, the one with photographs of covered bridges in Vermont. The baby's appointments are in blue ink. The covered bridges are very peaceful. You stand at the refrigerator for a moment after writing it down, looking at nothing in particular, and then the baby makes a sound and you go. Outside, the car is warm from sitting in the lot. You strap the baby into the seat and start the engine and pull onto the curving road that does not lead anywhere walkable. The radio comes on mid-sentence, someone describing a casserole. You don't turn it off. It's company of a kind, the kind that doesn't ask anything back. You drive home. The ironing basket is where you left it. It was always going to be where you left it. It has a kind of permanence to it now, that basket. A commitment to continuity. You hang up your coat. The baby needs feeding. You feed the baby. Somewhere in a file cabinet at Dr. Marcus's office, 12 minutes of your Tuesday exist on paper, and none of them are about you. You host the coffee clatch on Wednesday because it is your turn. 3 women arrive at 10 with covered dishes. You have made a bundt cake. The cake came out unevenly because you forgot to grease the pan, but you have inverted it onto the platter so the burnt side is down. Patricia from across the street brings up the new dishwasher she might be getting. Norma asks about your husband's job. You smile, pour the coffee, and you say everything is wonderful. Thank you for asking. The coffee clatch is, technically, a social event. It's also a next-door thread held in someone's kitchen, with cake informal, ostensibly warm, running on a soft, continuous hum of mutual evaluation. You know everyone's curtain schedule. Norma knows when you didn't hang your laundry by Tuesday. Patricia knows you looked tired last week because she has not stopped knowing it. Let's talk about what you say and what you don't. You say the baby is sleeping better. The baby is not sleeping better. You say you've been a little run down, which lands clean and sympathetic and explains nothing. A little rundown is what happens when you've had a cold. It's not a diagnosis. It's not a confession. It's the sentence that fits in the room without rearranging any furniture. Dorothy, who is sitting nearest the window, refills her own cup without asking, which means she's been here enough times that the kitchen belongs to her slightly. Dorothy's children are older. She says it gets easier, and she says it with the confidence of someone who has forgotten, specifically, how it felt. You nod. The bundt cake sits on the platter. The burnt side holds its position quietly, directly against the ceramic, maintaining its secret with the structural integrity of a closed case file. The clatch is, genuinely, the closest thing to company that exists on a Wednesday between 8 and noon. The husband left with the car at 6:50. The streets curve in a way that was not designed for walking. The nearest bus stop is far enough away to constitute a project. So when Dorothy and Norma and Patricia arrive with their covered dishes and their questions about the dishwasher, there is something real in the room. Something quiet, brief, and almost adequate. The room also has rules. Unwritten, unpublished, distributed by some system no one can name. You don't say, I cried for 40 minutes this morning before anyone woke up and I don't know why and I'm frightened. You don't say that. You say the baby is wonderful. The house is coming together. Jim might be getting a small raise. Patricia refills her own cup and changes the subject to the new shrub by the mailbox. The rule isn't cruelty. The rule is that the shrub is more comfortable than the crying. Norma's daughter Barbara, who is 7, comes through the back door without knocking, grabs a slice of bundt cake from the serving plate, and leaves with her thumb pressed directly through the icing. Nobody comments. Norma watches the door close and says, she's at that age, and everyone nods, because that age is a category that absorbs a lot. You pour more coffee. The morning moves forward in the way mornings do here, slowly and with great purpose, accomplishing nothing that can be named later. By 11:15, Patricia has decided she probably won't get the dishwasher. Norma has shared a casserole recipe that involves cream of mushroom soup in a way that the cream of mushroom soup was clearly designed for. Dorothy says goodbye last, and squeezes your arm at the door, and her face does something for a half second that isn't quite a question but isn't nothing either. You close the door. The kitchen has 4 coffee cups and a bundt cake with 1 thumb-shaped indentation. The afternoon is 4 hours away. You pick up Dorothy's cup and hold it for a moment longer than it takes to carry it to the sink. You are hanging the wash on the line at 2 in the afternoon. The neighbour, Mrs. Caldwell, is at her own line 3 yards over. She calls hello. You call hello back. She asks how the baby is sleeping. You say he is a champion sleeper. Mrs. Caldwell laughs warmly and moves on to her sheets. You finish hanging the 3rd pillowcase. The smile is still on your face. Mrs. Caldwell is no longer looking at you. The smile is still on your face. The compact comes out of the apron pocket the moment Mrs. Caldwell looks back at her sheets. You keep it there, not for vanity, not for lipstick, but to confirm that the face you are presenting to the yard is the face you intended to present. The 8-hour cream you applied this morning is holding. The pancake is holding. Tangy on the lips, which are dry from the sun, and from not saying anything true for several hours. The mirror closes with a small click. You put it back in the pocket. The afternoon runs from roughly 2 to 5, and it runs long. The baby is either napping or not napping. Either way, the ironing basket is full, and the basket has developed a philosophical position about this, which is that it will always be full. The television runs a soap opera at 3. The women in the soap opera are having affairs and dramatic reversals of fortune and emotional confrontations in well-lit, well-decorated, professionally framed rooms. You are ironing a pillowcase in a kitchen that smells like new lumber and the particular flat heat of a house with no shade trees yet. Mrs. Caldwell across the yard does not know. Your husband does not know. Doctor. Paulson at the 6-week visit didn't ask. He checked the uterus, checked the incision, and said you were healing nicely, and the appointment was over in 12 minutes. The DSM-I, published that same year, had no entry for what this is. The Book of Diagnoses had categories for psychotic, depressive reaction and involutional melancholia, which are the kinds of phrases that make a woman calculate very quickly whether she can afford to say anything at all. The answer is she can't. Divorce runs at about 2.5 per 1,000 nationally, and the number goes up when the wife has been described in writing as mentally unstable. There is no second car. There is no separate income. The streets in this neighbourhood curve gently, in a way that was apparently designed to be charming, and incidentally ensures you can't walk anywhere in under 40 minutes. You have been to the grocery store twice this week by arrangement. The grocery clerk knows you by name now. That's the social calendar. The official position on how you feel is that it lasted 3 to 5 days and then resolved. That was the baby blues. That window closed. What's here now doesn't have a name, and the absence of a name is doing a great deal of work. A headache is a headache. Fatigue is fatigue. The weight you've lost is the baby weight, still coming off. These are all plausible. They are so plausible that you have started to believe them yourself, in the mornings, before noon, before the afternoon. Mrs. Caldwell waves from her back door. You wave back. She is a good neighbour. She brought a casserole in week 2 and stayed for coffee and was genuinely warm and asked genuinely warm questions, and you gave genuinely warm answers, and she left. And you stood at the sink for 11 minutes doing nothing. It's not a smile. It's a small, polite and weight-bearing wall. It holds itself up now, without much help from you, the way a fence holds itself up after the posts have been set long enough. You decide on Thursday that you will walk the baby to the corner store. The corner store is 1.5 miles. You put the baby in the carriage. You start down the curving Levittown street that was built without sidewalks. A car passes, then another. The street curves left, then right, with no shoulder, only lawns. You push the carriage along the edge of someone's grass. The grass becomes a driveway. The driveway becomes another lawn. You are not, technically, allowed to walk on any of it. Levittown has 17,447 houses. It has curving streets specifically because curving streets were considered more pleasant and residential than grid streets. Nobody appears to have tested this theory by walking one while pushing 40 pounds of carriage on a road with no shoulder in August. The curves were an aesthetic decision. You are living inside someone else's aesthetic decision. You turn back at the second driveway. Not because you gave up, because there is nowhere structurally to go. The street doesn't connect to anything walkable. The nearest bus stop is theoretical. The car left at dawn with your husband inside it and won't return until the particular shade of dusk that precedes dinner. You are not housebound because you lack ambition. You are housebound because the built environment has very strong opinions about how you should spend Thursday. Between 9 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon, the baby sleeps, wakes, feeds, sleeps again. The ironing basket sits in the corner of the bedroom full, patient, and immovable on principle. You iron 4 shirts. The basket remains full. You fold the shirts. You put them away. You stand in the hallway for a moment that is either 10 seconds or 20 minutes, and the only sound is a soap opera from the television in the living room that you turned on for company and stopped following around Tuesday. A neighbour named Peggy from 4 houses down the curve sometimes appears at the back gate around 10. She brings coffee in a thermos, because her percolator makes too much for one person, which is the stated reason. The real reason is the same as yours. She sets the thermos on the porch railing and leans against it with the particular posture of someone who has decided not to sit down because sitting down means staying longer, and staying longer means saying something true. You don't say anything true. You talk about whether the Hendersons are having the Morrisons over, and whether the casserole she brought to the block party had cream of mushroom or cream of celery, and the conversation is warm, and it is nothing, and it is everything you have. The coffee clatch has its own economy. The exchange rate is recipes for composure. You bring one, you receive one, nobody mentions the transaction. Of course there's a cost. The coffee clatch is also a room where you are being quietly assessed. Not maliciously, the assessment is structural. Everybody in that kitchen is performing the same thing you are, which means everyone is also watching to see how well the others perform it. A bad morning shows. Not dramatically just in a pause before you answer a question. A fraction of a second too long, which Peggy will not mention to your face and will mention to nobody at all and will simply file, the way all of you file things, quietly, against a future you hope won't come. The afternoon is the hardest part, specifically the hours between 2 and 4, after lunch is cleared and before dinner becomes urgent enough to structure the time. The baby naps. The television is off because the baby is sleeping. The house is quiet in the specific way that only a house with a sleeping infant inside it is quiet, weighted, conditional, the kind of quiet that will end badly if you do anything too loud, including, you suspect, thinking too hard. You sit in the kitchen. The sun comes through the window at an angle that makes the linoleum look very clean and very permanent. You are 26 years old. You have everything. You eat a cracker. You taste the cracker. Then you eat another one and don't taste it. Then you put the sleeve back in the cupboard and stand at the counter for a moment that is either resting or something else entirely, and the only way to tell the difference is to wait and see which one it turns out to have been. The linoleum is still very clean. The afternoon has not moved at all. You go check on the baby, who is asleep and fine, and completely unaware that Thursday is this long. You decide on Friday to call your mother in Pennsylvania. You pick up the receiver. You wait for the operator. The operator places the call and tells you it will be $1.35 for the first 3 minutes. $1.35 is the cost of a pound of butter and a loaf of bread. The phone rings in Wilkes-Barre. Your mother picks up. You have 3 minutes before the bill starts compounding. You have been waiting 4 days to make this call. You say you're fine. You say the baby is fine. You say the house is coming along, which is true. The curtains are up now, the beige ones, which your mother will be glad to hear because she picked them out at Sears and mailed them in a box with tissue paper and a note that said "Home Sweet Home" in her handwriting on a card shaped like a house. You say you slept well. You haven't slept well since March. The operator will cut in at 2 minutes and 50 seconds to remind you the 3 minutes are nearly up. She will say it in the tone of someone announcing a train departure. You will say "love you" very quickly, and your mother will say "love you," and then there will be a click, and you will be back in the kitchen with the receiver in your hand and the baby in the other room beginning to stir. $15 in today's money. That's what 3 minutes with your mother costs. You don't make the call every week. Your sister is in Scranton. Your aunt is in Harrisburg. You are, by map, close to both of them. By the layout of your days, 1 car, no sidewalks, a husband who leaves at 7 and returns at 6, you are effectively in a different country. A country that sometimes receives casseroles by mail. The casseroles arrive cold, dense, and slightly defeated, which is accurate. If you'd had 6 minutes instead of 3, here is what you would have said. You would have said that some mornings you put on the pancake and the tangy and stood at the window for 20 minutes without moving. You would have said that food doesn't taste like much. You would have said that you cried on Tuesday and again on Thursday behind the door while the baby slept, not loudly, just steadily, the way a slow leak sounds. You don't say any of this. There are 3 minutes, and 3 minutes is for information, not for the other thing. A woman named Ruth on your street calls her mother in Cincinnati every other Thursday. She times it with an egg timer so she doesn't go over. The egg timer sits on the phone table. It's the same one she uses for soft boiling eggs, and it has a small crack in the face from a time she set it down harder than she meant to. Ruth hasn't told anyone about the crack. She just watches it anyway. Your mother, for her part, would not have known what to do with the information. Not because she doesn't love you, because in 1952, what you're describing doesn't have a name yet, and things without names are very hard to help. She would have said you need more iron. She would have said it gets easier when they start walking. She would have said your grandmother had 6 and she managed fine, which is true, and also not the point, and also something your grandmother would agree was not the point if anyone had ever asked her, which they didn't. The GI Bill moved 2.4 million young families into houses like this one by 1956. Your house is one of them. Your mother's apartment in Wilkes-Barre, 2 flights up, with the cousin downstairs and the aunt across the hall and the bakery on the corner, none of that came with you. The paperwork did not mention it. The closing didn't either. The realtor said the schools were excellent and the yard was a generous size, both of which were true, and didn't bring up the part about how you would call your mother by the egg timer and run out of minutes before either of you got to the actual sentence. You hang up the receiver. The kitchen is quiet. The baby has settled back to sleep. Outside. The street curves gently away in both directions, as though offering you a choice, which it isn't. You take the laundry basket to the backyard at 2:15. The baby is napping. The older child is at kindergarten until 3. You have 10 minutes, possibly 15. You begin pinning the sheets to the line, and as you reach for the second clothespin, you feel the crying start somewhere near your sternum. You let it happen. You do not stop pinning sheets while it happens. The sheets keep going up. The clothespins keep coming out of the bag. The crying lasts about 9 minutes and you have a wet pillowcase to wipe your face with. The compact mirror comes out of your apron pocket. You check. You are pink around the edges, but nothing structural has changed. You press the back of your wrist against each eye, left then right. The same sequence every time. The pancake is held. Tangy is held. You look, from a reasonable distance, like a woman who has been outside. This is its own kind of skill. Nobody named it a skill because it wasn't in any book. Dr. Spock's book, the second best-selling book in American history, 750,000 copies by 1952, a copy on approximately every kitchen counter in Levittown covered colic, teething, fever management, and the correct firmness of affection. The mother's internal state occupied roughly the same square footage as the index. The book knew a great deal about your child. It had no particular questions about you. 9 minutes by the laundry line is not an accident. 9 minutes is calibrated. 3 is not enough. 15 is too long, someone sees the car, someone waves, someone comes over with a question about the church potluck schedule, and then you're doing a different performance entirely. 9 is the working number. You've established this without writing it down anywhere. The afternoon hour between 2 and 5 has a specific quality. The soap opera on the television set has ended. The ironing basket is present. It is always present. The ironing basket doesn't diminish, it regenerates, the way a sourdough starter regenerates, except the sourdough starter eventually produces something you want. The baby will wake in 40 minutes. Your husband will return in 4 hours. The gap between those two things has a sound, which is no sound at all except the refrigerator and one distant lawnmower doing something hopeful 2 streets over. The baby blues were officially a 3 to 5 day event. After day 5, the baby blues became something without a name. The medical community had very strong opinions about day 6. A nurse named Patricia, she has a way of folding her clipboard against her chest like she's protecting it from you, tells you at the front desk that the doctor will see you shortly. Shortly is 22 minutes. You sit in the waiting room with a Good Housekeeping from April. The cover story is about casseroles. There is no story about the laundry line. There is never a story about the laundry line. The combined circulation of McCall's, Good Housekeeping, Ladies' Home Journal, and Woman's Day runs into the tens of millions per issue, and the editorial position on the laundry line is, that's not something we cover. You go back inside. The baby is still asleep. You put the compact mirror back in your apron pocket. The ironing basket is there, radiating its particular patience. You pick up the iron. The ironing basket lives next to the board in the hall closet. You iron the contents on Monday. By Wednesday morning, the basket is full again. You do not know mechanically how this happens. The shirts return. The pillowcases return. The handkerchiefs return. The basket is wicker, and it has a small split in the rim from where you set the iron down on it in August. You stand in front of the board at 11 a metre. On Wednesday, and you look at the basket, and the basket looks back. The iron itself weighs 6 pounds. This is a fact you know in your shoulder. You've been doing this since before the baby, and before that since your mother handed it off with the approximate ceremony of someone transferring a debt. The cord wraps around the back handle when you store it, and unwrapping it is the first small act of every ironing session, the way some people uncork a bottle. You set it down on the heel, wait for the heat to come up, and the whole closet fills with the particular smell of cotton under pressure, not unpleasant, just very present, like the morning announcing itself without apology. 11 a.m. On a Wednesday in 1955, the baby is down. The older one is at school. The television is off because you turned it off after the morning program, which had 3 women on a panel, small, blonde, and reliably enthusiastic, agreeing that homemaking was a form of self-expression. You agreed with them while eating half a piece of toast. You are now ironing a handkerchief. A handkerchief is a small square of fabric. It takes 90 seconds. There are 11 more in the basket. The radio is on. Low. A woman sings something about a man who came home. You are thinking about the GI Bill, except you're not thinking about it in those terms. You're thinking about how your mother is 400 miles away, and 3 minutes on the phone with her costs the same as Thursday's ground beef. The math is not complicated. You do not make the call. You iron the handkerchief. A neighbour, Dolores, knocked Tuesday to borrow a cup of sugar and stayed 40 minutes. She talked about her sister-in-law's new refrigerator and the school board, and whether the new family at the end of the block was Catholic. You listened, offered 2 opinions, laughed once at the correct moment. When she left, you stood at the closed door for slightly longer than was necessary. Dolores had powdered her nose on the way out. You noticed, because you always notice now, who is wearing the face and how well. The basket has its own accounting. Shirts with the collar creased wrong go back in. Anything with a stain you didn't catch goes back in. The iron has opinions about temperature. Wool wants one setting, cotton wants another, and it has burned through a blouse before, quietly, without warning, the way certain mornings arrive. You hold a pillowcase up to the light to check for missed creases. There aren't any. You look anyway. The afternoon is a long corridor from noon to 5. You know this. You've known it since March, though you don't say March. You say lately, you say, sometimes I get a little tired. Lately and sometimes are load-bearing words. They carry a great deal without going anywhere near the actual weight. The basket empties by 1. You fold everything with the seams meeting. The shirts hang in a row in the closet by colour, light to dark, which is a system you developed alone and which no one has ever noticed or commented on. That's fine. The system is for you. You close the closet door. By 2 o'clock, the particular silence is back, just the refrigerator hum and the sound of someone mowing 2 streets over and the baby, still down, breathing into the monitor you press your ear against sometimes just to confirm. You sit at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that has gone cold. You drink it cold. You are not tasting it anyway. The food has been doing that for a while, arriving as texture, registering as neither good nor bad, just present, like the smell of new lumber that the house still produces sometimes from the walls when the temperature changes. The ironing basket will be full again by Friday. You know this. It is not a surprise or a complaint. It is just the shape of the week, a thing that empties and refills, with no particular comment on itself. The basket has no opinion about this. The basket is doing fine. You have made it to 2 p.m. The baby has gone down for the long nap. The older child is at school. The house is silent in the particular way houses are silent when no one is awake in them. You have 3 hours until the school bus. You have 4 hours and 15 minutes until your husband comes home. The chores are done. The chores are always done by 2. You sit at the kitchen table. You do not know what to do with your hands. The soap opera is on. You turned it on without deciding to. A woman on the screen is crying because a man has lied to her about something involving a medical secret and a twin brother, and the audience is expected to find this devastating, and you do not find it devastating, and you do not find it anything. You watch her cry. You note that she does it very cleanly. No redness, no nose, just water from the eyes, which is not how it works. But television has opinions about how crying should look. 2:15 does not feel sad, exactly. Sad would be something. It is more like a radio signal that won't quite tune. You can hear something there, behind the static, but you can't make out the frequency. The light comes through the kitchen window at a low, flat, slightly yellow angle and lands on the linoleum and just sits there. The refrigerator hums. It has been humming since June. You have stopped hearing it except in moments like this, when it is the loudest thing in the world. You get up. You walk to the back window. The yard is there. The fence is there. Across the yard, Barbara's kitchen window reflects the sky back at you, which is how you know Barbara is not home. You do not know where Barbara goes on Thursdays. You have not asked. Asking would be a kind of admission that you were watching, and watching would mean you had nothing else to do, and nothing else to do is not a thing you are allowed to say out loud in 1956 with a house. This clean and a baby, this healthy, and a husband with a steady job and a refrigerator that hums. You pour a cup of coffee you don't want. Miriam down the street takes Miltown. Now her doctor gave her a prescription in October, a small white tablet, and she described it as taking the edge off, which you understood to mean that the edge existed. By 1957 there will be 36 tons of it consumed per month across the country. Right now it is just Miriam's word for something neither of you has named. You hold your coffee cup with both hands the way you hold things when you need something to hold. The compact mirror comes out. Not for touch-ups, there's no one to see you. You open it anyway. You look at the face in it for a moment, the way you'd check a door to see if it was still locked. It is still locked. The pancake is holding. The face looks like the face that waved to Dolores on Tuesday. The face that said, "just a little tired," to your mother-in-law on the phone. It is a calm, competent, and professionally photographable face. You close the mirror. The baby makes a sound from the other room. Not waking, just a small sleep sound, the kind that means she's still under. You stand very still until it stops. The refrigerator resumes. The soap opera has moved on to a different problem involving a different secret. Outside, the street curves gently away in both directions, going nowhere in particular, because these streets were not built to go anywhere in particular. They were built to contain. They are very good at it. The school bus comes at 5. You will hear it before you see it. You will stand up from wherever you are sitting, and you will go to the door, and your face will be ready. You turn the television on at 2:30 because you cannot tolerate the quiet anymore. Search for Tomorrow is on Channel 4. The guiding light follows at 2:45. You do not particularly follow the plots. You know that Joanne is in trouble again, and that the trouble involves either a doctor or a lawyer. You sit on the davenport with a mending basket in your lap. The mending stays in the basket. The voices fill the room. The voices are not company, but they sound like company, which is close enough for now. The set is a Zenith, 17 inches, in a cabinet with legs. Your husband carried it in on a Saturday in October and positioned it with the seriousness of a man installing load-bearing infrastructure. It sits in the corner of the living room at a slight angle, aimed at the davenport, aimed at you. The cabinet has a drawer. The drawer contains the instruction manual, which you have never opened, and a TV guide folded open to a week that has already passed. Search for Tomorrow began in 1951, which means it is already 3 years old and still going, which is more than you can say for most things in this house that were supposed to help. The show moves slowly. Characters sit in kitchens and speak about their feelings in long, uninterrupted sentences. Nobody interrupts. Nobody suddenly needs a glass of milk or cries for no reason or goes silent for so long that the other person gets up and checks on them from the doorway. On daytime television, feelings are dramatic but also manageable. They have commercial breaks. They resolve before 4 o'clock. Mrs. Elaine Pruitt from 3 Houses Down once told you, while removing a casserole dish from your hands with an authority that suggested she had been planning the gesture, that she doesn't allow herself the soaps. "Too much misery," she said. "Too much carrying on." You nodded. You did not tell her that the misery is precisely the point. That's sitting inside someone else's acknowledged misery, even fictional misery, even misery performed by an actress in a studio in New York while a man with a clipboard stands just off camera, feels like being handed something you were told did not exist. The show goes to commercial. A woman in a shirtwaist dress holds up a can of Ajax and looks directly at the camera with an expression that is bright, certain, and slightly aggressive. The can gleams. She gleams. The kitchen behind her gleams. This is not a kitchen. It's a warning. The guiding light comes on at 2:45. You shift the mending basket to the cushion beside you, which is not moving it far. The afternoon sun has crossed to the back of the house, which means the living room is dim now, which is fine. You don't turn on a lamp. Sitting in the half-dark with the television on is not a symptom. It is Tuesday. It is what you do. The women on these programs cry with full permission. The camera holds on their faces. The music swells a little, not obtrusively, just enough. Nobody in the plot says, "But you have so much to be grateful for." Nobody says it's probably just the hormones. Give it a few more days. Nobody's husband drives up in a Nash Rambler at 5:45 and asks what's for dinner, with a cadence that answers its own question. You watch for an hour. The baby is still asleep. You've checked twice. The mending is still in the basket, having formed a compact and apparently permanent society among itself. A sock, a collar, a small pair of trousers with a knee that gave out weeks ago. They've been in there long enough to develop seniority. You will get to them. Not today, but eventually, in the way that eventually has started to feel like a direction rather than a time. The show ends. The credits roll over a still image of a lighthouse. You sit for a moment after, in the specific silence that follows television heavier than the silence before, because now you know the silence was always there and you were only postponing it. You reach for the mending basket. You pick up the sock with a hole near the heel. You hold it for a moment, then you put it back. The lighthouse, you think, is doing a lot of work for a soap opera about lawyers. Dinner is at 6:30. You serve pot roast, mashed potatoes and green beans almondine. The husband sits at the head, the older child at his right, the baby in the high chair next to you. You pass the gravy. You ask about your husband's day. You cut the older child's meat into smaller pieces. You bring the fork to your mouth and you chew. The pot roast registers as warm and as fibrous. The pot roast does not, in any other sense, register at all. Your husband asks how the pot roast turned out. He asks about the gravy. He does not ask about the long flat stretch between 2 and 5. Your doctor, at the 6-week checkup, examined the uterus and the incision and sent you home with a pamphlet about nutrition. The pamphlet has a recipe for beef stew. You already make beef stew. You make it on Wednesdays. You smile at something your husband says. The smile holds in place for a moment after he's turned back to his plate. It stays there the way a stage curtain stays up between scenes, not because anything is happening behind it, but because lowering it would require an explanation. The baby throws a piece of green bean onto the linoleum. You pick it up. You sit back down. The older child asks if there's dessert. There is jello with fruit suspended inside, which you made this morning while the baby napped, which required a specific amount of planning, which you executed perfectly, which proves nothing is wrong. Food arrives as texture and temperature. The mashed potatoes are soft. The green beans have a slight resistance before they give. The butter on top of everything is soft, yellow, and doing its job structurally. Flavor is a rumor from somewhere else, from some other woman's dinner table. You eat because not eating would require an explanation, and explanations are the one thing this table does not have room for between the gravy boat and the high chair tray. You cut a child's pot roast into pieces small enough not to constitute a choking hazard. The pieces are uniform. The work is meticulous. The husband mentions something about a colleague. You nod. You say, "That's interesting," which it isn't, which you know, which he doesn't notice. The older child wants more mashed potatoes. You serve the mashed potatoes. The baby grabs the edge of the high chair tray and shakes it with the focused aggression of someone lodging an official complaint. You intercept the tray before the applesauce goes. Dinner in 1955 has paperwork. The clean tablecloth is evidence. The hot food is evidence. The cheerful, present wife at the left side of the head of the table is evidence. Evidence of what? That everything is fine. The house is fine. The children are fine. The marriage is fine. The woman in the middle of all this fine is fine. You are not fine. But you're serving jello. You clear the plates. You run water over them in the sink. Through the window above the sink you can see the Hendersons' kitchen light. Also on. Also a woman at a sink. Also rinsing plates. You have never discussed with Carol Henderson how dinner feels. You have discussed jello molds. She prefers the lime. You make the cherry. It is possible that Carol Henderson is also standing at her sink tasting nothing, in which case the two of you are separated by 40 feet of unshaded lawn and a profound mutual silence. It is also possible Carol Henderson is perfectly happy, and you are the only one standing in the dark interior of a life that looks exactly correct from the outside. You don't know. The window doesn't say. You hear the Buick pull into the driveway at 6:15. The garage door opens, then closes. You hear his shoes on the kitchen tile. You apply a fresh layer of Tanguy in the hallway mirror in the 8 seconds between the kitchen and the living room. By the time he comes through the doorway, the second face is in place. You ask him how the meeting went. He kisses you on the cheek. He says he could use a drink. You go to the cart to fix him one. The cart is a bar cart, technically, chrome and glass, with a decanter that was a wedding gift from someone whose name you no longer remember. You pour 2 fingers of rye. You add a splash of water because he likes a splash of water. Your hands are steady. You've noticed this about yourself, that your hands are reliably steady at 6:15, which is something, even if you can't explain what. He loosens his tie and describes the meeting in broad strokes. Someone said something, someone else disagreed. There may be a promotion or there may not. You nod at the right intervals. The right interval is precise, brief, and faintly distracted. The wrong interval is warm, generous, and visibly interested. It takes about 8 months to develop, and by the time you have it, you're so good at it that he doesn't notice it's a skill. He doesn't ask about your day as a question that expects an answer. He asks about your day the way someone confirms a delivery. "Fine," you say. "The baby had a good nap. You made a roast." He nods, satisfied, the way a man nods when the information matches his model of the world. The roast is on the table. The baby is in the crib. The math is complete. A neighbour, Doug Peterson from 3 houses down, Once told your husband that his wife, Pat, seemed like she'd really found her footing. Your husband told you this over dinner the following Tuesday as a compliment, possibly as encouragement, possibly as a benchmark. Pat Peterson sets her table with cloth napkins on Tuesdays. You are aware of this. The napkins are doing work. The evening splits in two. There is the evening as it appears, the roast, the drink, the radio on low, the baby asleep, and there is the evening as you experience it from slightly behind your own eyes, watching yourself move through the kitchen and say the right things and laugh at the right moment when he says something from work that's meant to be funny. Both versions are happening simultaneously. Only one of them is visible. By 1957, a New Yorker cartoonist had drawn a man at a bar ordering a Miltown Manhattan, 2 olives. The bartender in the drawing looks completely unsurprised. The joke is that it's become that normal. What the cartoon doesn't draw is the woman at home who made the arrangement possible, who put the children down and fixed her second face and asked about the meeting and laughed at the right moment, so that the man at the bar could afford to joke about his nerves. She isn't in the cartoon. She's mostly not in any of them. He finishes his drink. You refill it. At some point he asks if you're all right, and you say, of course. You're just a little tired. The baby was up at 3. He says you should get more sleep. This is correct advice. It is the only advice available. You say you will try, which is also the only available answer, and the conversation moves on towards supper, which is already warm, which has been warm for some time, which has been waiting in the oven with the patience of something that understands it will not be acknowledged for what it actually is. You subscribe to 4 magazines. McCall's arrives on the first Tuesday. Good Housekeeping arrives on the second. Ladies' Home Journal and Woman's Day fill the gaps. You read them at the kitchen table while the baby naps. The recipes are filed in the index card box. The article on slipcovers is dog-eared. The letters column contains a woman in Akron who is having difficulty with her in-laws. There is no letter from a woman in Akron about anything else. There is, you have checked, never a letter from a woman in Akron about anything else. The combined circulation of these 4 magazines runs in the tens of millions per issue. Every Tuesday and second Thursday and in between, some version of the same cover arrives in mailboxes across the country, a woman in a clean apron, beaming at a casserole, beaming at a child, beaming at the particular brand of indoor light that only exists in photographs. The woman on the cover has no under-eye circles. The woman on the cover has never cried into a laundry basket. She is not performing anything. She simply is this way, naturally, at all times, including before coffee. McCall's editor Otis Wees coined the word togetherness in 1954. It appeared with a lowercase t in italics, as though the concept was so self-evident it barely needed announcing. The idea was that the family unit was a joint project, a shared domestic enterprise centered on the home, which is to say, the work is your family, and there is no life, and the stage is your kitchen, and you are the only speaker, and the audience left at dawn in the single household car. The omissions are quiet, consistent, and clean. There are articles on childcare. There are articles on stretch marks, framed as a management problem. There are articles on your husband's digestion, your husband's stress at the office, your husband's need for a quiet home when he returns. There is, in 1954 and 1955 and 1956, no article that begins. You may feel like you are disappearing, and that feeling may not resolve in 3 to 5 days. That article does not exist. The index has no entry for it. McCall's, for its part, has a great deal to say about curtain valances. A Good Housekeeping feature editor named Carol always looks a little pressed, a little specific about corners drops, a galley proof on the editorial desk, a casserole feature, 14 variations, 7 of which involve cream of mushroom soup, doing the structural work that ambition used to do. The magazine goes to print. Somewhere in Levittown or Lakewood or any of the 17,000 identical houses in any of the identical subdivisions, a woman files the recipe in the index card box. She is not fine. The index card box does not know this. The letters column is the closest the magazines come to the real thing, and it doesn't come close. Women write about curtain hardware and difficult mothers-in-law and a neighbour who borrows Tupperware and doesn't return it promptly. The editors select for what fits, which means they select for what the magazine has already decided a reader's concerns look like. A letter arrives occasionally something shakier, something off the designated register, and it does not appear in the printed column. The column has a format. The format has opinions about what constitutes a solvable problem. The advertisements are doing their own work alongside the editorial. Miltown is in there, marketed to physicians but legible to any reader who knew what nervous tension looked like on the page. A smiling woman, a gentle headline. The suggestion that the right compound, taken at the correct interval, could restore the woman on the cover's particular quality of indoor light. By 1957, Americans are consuming the stuff by the ton. The ad doesn't mention that. The ad has never been interested in tonnage. You dog-ear the slipcover article. You file the casserole. You read the letters from Akron. The magazine goes back on the coffee table with the covers facing up, the beaming woman visible from the door, which is how you leave it because the neighbor might stop by, and the neighbor will see the coffee table before she sees your face, and you have a few seconds of preparation that the coffee table at least does not require. McCall's introduced the word in 1954. The word is togetherness. The cover that month showed a family of 4 on a lawn with a beach ball. The article inside described togetherness as a joint domestic enterprise centered on the home. You have read the article twice. You have practiced the word at the coffee clatch. You use it on the phone with your mother-in-law on Sundays. You apply it to your own household the way you apply the pancake every morning, in the order recommended, before anyone is permitted to see you. The word is doing a lot of work. It has to. It is covering approximately the same surface area as the 8-hour cream, which is also how long your husband is away, which you have begun to think of not as a coincidence, but as a coincidence you are not allowed to mention. The magazine did not say togetherness was easy. It implied togetherness was a choice, which is worse, because a choice implies you could be choosing badly. The coffee clatch sits on top of all this. It meets Tuesday and Thursday mornings, and sometimes Wednesday if Dorothy across the street has a new recipe. You bring crumb cake. Gladys brings the percolator. A woman named Irene, who moved in 3 months ago, brings her baby in a Moses basket and sets it on the kitchen floor and does not look at it for 45 minutes. Nobody mentions this. You recognize it the way you recognize the pancake on each other's faces, the specific evenness, the absence of shadows under the eyes that human skin doesn't actually produce on its own. You don't say anything because Gladys doesn't say anything and Irene doesn't say anything and the coffee clatch has its own rules, none of which were written down, all of which are perfectly understood. It is the only room on the street where anyone is allowed to compare notes, and the notes are about crumb cake. Warmer than nothing. Also less likely to refer you to a professional. The priest, when you told him last spring, suggested you count your blessings and offered no list. He said it with kindness. He said it with the particular warmth of a man who has never been responsible for a household at 2 a.m. The blessings you could identify at the time were the house, the children, the car, the husband, the crumb cake. The crumb cake was a real comfort. The priest did not make the list with you. He had other appointments. Between 2 and 5, the soap opera ends and the silence reassembles itself. The baby naps. The ironing basket does not diminish. You have been ironing from this basket since March, and it has the posture of something patient, settled, and structurally permanent. The same shirts reappearing at the top, slightly warm, slightly wrinkled, like they've been thinking about it. You stand in the kitchen and the new paint smell is still there, faintly, underneath the coffee. The street outside is empty in the curved, sidewalkless way that Levittown streets are empty, not vacant. Exactly. Just arranged so that walking somewhere requires a destination, and the destinations available to you without a car are the mailbox, the yard again, the car left at dawn. It will return at dusk. The car's feelings about this arrangement are not recorded. You check the compact mirror before going back outside after the laundry. Not vanity. Reconnaissance. The face in the mirror has to be the same face that was there at breakfast, the togetherness face, properly assembled, with the tangy set and the 8-hour applied, and the expression calibrated to someone who is grateful and fine, and perhaps slightly tired in the way that is charming rather than alarming. Gladys is sometimes in her yard at this hour. You have held this face for so long in front of Gladys that you are no longer sure which face is yours. Gladys is probably not sure either. This is, in its way, a very mutual arrangement. The American Psychiatric Association published the first DSM in 1952. The book is 132 pages long. It contains 106 diagnostic categories. It does not contain a diagnosis for what is happening to you. The book is very confident about its 106 categories. You would not, of course, ever read this book. You will never see a copy. You will never know it was published. But the absence works on you the way most institutional absences work. The thing your doctor does not have a name for becomes, in his office, a thing that does not have a name in you, either. At the 6-week visit, you sit on the paper-covered table and the paper crinkles when you shift your weight. The doctor examines your incision. He examines your uterus. He asks if you're healing well, and you say yes, and he writes something brief, neat, and roughly identical to the entry above it in a folder. The visit takes 11 minutes. He does not ask about sleep, except in the context of the baby's sleep. He does not ask about crying, except in the context of the baby's crying. There is no second page on the form. The form, in fairness, is doing exactly what it was printed to do. Women were 6% of American physicians in 1950. Every doctor you see is a man. This is not a complaint, it's just the room. A man in a white coat asking how you feel and waiting, with professional patience, for the correct answer. The correct answer is tired but grateful. You give it. He nods. The folder closes. He is going to say healing well. He has said it 40 times this month. A nurse named Patricia hands you a mimeographed sheet before discharge from the maternity ward. It lists foods to avoid, rest recommendations, and a note about your follow-up appointment. Patricia has neat, careful, professionally cheerful handwriting. The sheet does not mention mood. Patricia doesn't mention mood either. She has handed out this sheet 200 times. She tucks the edge under your water glass so it doesn't slide. Helene Deutsch's textbook sits on Dr. Hennessy's shelf. He underlined nothing. He didn't need to. Betty Friedan was already taking notes. She was talking to women in the mid-1950s, women in houses like yours, with ironing baskets like yours, with that particular silence between 2 and 5 in the afternoon. Her notebook is in a kitchen in Rockland County, and another like it is in a kitchen in Glen Cove, and a third is in a kitchen in your own town, where she stopped on a Tuesday in 1956 to interview a woman named Eleanor about the curtain hardware. Eleanor did not talk about the curtain hardware. The notebook filled up. That book won't come out until 1963. You are in her notebook right now, described in general. You go back to Dr. Hennessy at 12 weeks, because the tiredness has not lifted. You rehearse the sentences in the parking lot. You have written nothing down, because writing it down is dangerous. He sees you for 9 minutes. He asks how the baby is sleeping. He suggests you might be doing too much. He suggests a vitamin. He says many women feel this way at first and it passes. He is, statistically, almost certainly a man. Only 6 in every 100 American doctors in 1950 are women, and none of them practice in your county. The vitamin is B12. It arrives in a small brown bottle with a label that takes itself very seriously. You take it every morning after the husband's car has backed out of the driveway, standing at the kitchen counter in your housecoat, and you wait to feel something. The bottle does not comment on how long you've been waiting. It just sits there, maintaining its position on the shelf with the quiet authority of an object that has never once been wrong about anything. Dr. Hennessy is not unkind. That's the part that stays with you later. He doesn't dismiss you with impatience or a raised eyebrow. He dismisses you with warmth, which is harder to argue with. He writes the word rest on a small pad before you have finished the second sentence. Helene Deutsch's textbook sits on the shelf behind him. The DSM-I sits next to it. The 9 minutes end with a B12 bottle in your hand and an instruction to rest more, which is a little like handing someone a thimble and calling it a plumbing solution. Marilyn, the receptionist, smiles at you on the way out and hands you a small card with the follow-up date printed in blue ink. She has the practiced, polite, professionally weatherproof smile of someone who hands out follow-up cards all day and has learned not to read the faces above them. You smile back. The smile holds in place for the full walk to the parking lot, for the turnout of the lot, for the first 2 blocks toward home. Then it doesn't. Headaches are legitimate, common, and easy to acknowledge. Fatigue, after a new baby is expected. Weight loss can be attributed to nursing, to busy days, to the general physical overhead of running a household at 26 with a person who cannot yet hold their own head up. None of these require a name. None of these require a word from the DSM-I that doesn't fit. You are tired. You have headaches. You've lost 8 pounds since the birth. In 1955, an explanation that doesn't require a psychiatrist is an explanation worth keeping. The follow-up card says 3 months. You put it in the kitchen drawer next to the B12 and the rubber bands and the small paper bag from the hardware store that has been there so long nobody remembers what's in it. You will go back in 3 months. You will rehearse the sentences again. You will be seen for 9 minutes. Dr. Hennessy will be, if anything, slightly more confident. Behind Dr. Hennessy's desk, on the second shelf, sits a 2-volume set with green cloth covers, The Psychology of Women by Helene Deutsch, 1945. He has not opened it in 3 years. He does not need to. The framework inside the book is the framework inside his head. It says that a woman who struggles in motherhood is resisting her biologically destined role. It says that her sadness is neurotic. It says that her trouble is in her, not around her. You do not see the book on the shelf. The book sees you. Deutsch trained under Freud in Vienna. Her book became required reading in American medical schools through the late 1940s and into the 1950s. The vocabulary was tidy, confident, and built to hold. The diagnosis arrived before you walked in the room. Across from Dr. Hennessy, you have a choice. You can describe what is actually happening, the flat grey quality of every afternoon, the food that registers as texture, the smile that stays in place 3 seconds longer than anything behind it. Or you can describe the headaches. You choose the headaches. If you say neurotic, Hennessy hears Deutsch. If you say headaches, he reaches for B12. You have learned which answer fits in the room. Miranda Kowalski, 3 houses down, figured this out 6 weeks before you did. She sits in Hennessy's office with her hands folded in her lap and describes what sounds like a sinus problem, pressure behind the eyes, fatigue, a general heaviness that began in late autumn. Hennessy nods and writes something on his notepad. She watches him write. She does not ask what he wrote. You don't ask what he writes either. The notepad faces him. The threat doesn't have to be spoken out loud to be present in the room. It sits on the second shelf, between the green covers, radiating quietly. What Deutsch's book does not contain, a chapter on what it is like to spend 11 hours alone in 750 square feet with a child who cannot yet speak. A chapter on a husband who drives away at 7 and returns at 6 and asks what's for dinner in the tone of a man who has had a day and believes you have not. A chapter on the ironing basket that refills by some domestic physics that defies explanation. The book is very thorough on the subject of neurotic resistance. It has nothing to say about the afternoons, so you leave Dr. Hennessy's office with the B12 and the headache diagnosis and a general sense that you have passed some kind of test you didn't know you were taking. Outside, the car is waiting because today you asked a neighbour for a ride, which required explaining where you were going and why, which required a small plausible story about the headaches. The neighbour said she'd had the same thing. She probably had. On the third visit, Dr. Hennessy writes you a script. He tears the paper from the pad and slides it across the desk. The word on the paper is Miltown. He explains it is for the nerves, that it will take the edge off, that many women in your circumstances find it helpful. The whole exchange takes 90 seconds. You fold the paper into your purse next to the receipt for the milk. You stop by the pharmacy on the way home. The pharmacist greets you by your husband's name. He has been doing this for 8 years. He has not been corrected in 8 years. Miltown launched in 1955. By 1957, Americans are consuming 36 tons of it per month. 36 tons. That is not a pharmaceutical product. That is a weather system. That is approximately 72,000 pounds of nerves dispensed monthly in tablet form by mail-order pharmacy and corner drugstore alike. The drug is called meprobamate in the medical literature and Miltown everywhere else, and it is being prescribed to women for what their doctors are calling nervous tension, which is a phrase that covers a great deal of ground without mapping any of it. 1 in 20 Americans has taken it by 1956. The New Yorker runs a cartoon of a man at a bar ordering a Miltown Manhattan. The bartender, in the cartoon, makes it with 2 olives. This is considered funny. Everyone understands the reference. The cartoonist did not have to caption it. The tablet softens the afternoon. Not the 2 p.m. silence. Not the ironing basket. Not the particular quality of the light through the kitchen window at 4 o'clock flat, low, and faintly accusing that seems to arrive specifically to remind you of something you can't name. Those remain. But the edge comes off in the way Dr. Hennessy described, in the way that makes the edge feel like your fault for having noticed it. You take it with water. You take it at roughly the same time each day. You do not tell your husband, initially, because the word nervous means something socially that it does not mean medically, and in your house those two meanings are not easy to separate. Henrietta Marsh, 3 streets over, has the same prescription. She keeps hers in a lipstick case at the bottom of a cosmetics bag, which is a very reasonable place to keep something that isn't supposed to exist. She takes it before the church social, before her mother-in-law visits, before the school play, the block party, the dinner party where she will stand in her kitchen producing canapés and radiating contentment for 4 uninterrupted hours. The lipstick case has a small, round and slightly tarnished mirror inside. She checks it before she goes in. The Miltown ads in the medical journals are aimed at the doctor, not at you. A page in JAMA in 1956 shows a tidy woman at a sink, half smiling, captioned in the careful, paternal, faintly worried voice of pharmaceutical copy. For the tensions of the modern housewife. The word tensions is doing the work of about 4 other words it didn't want to print. Dr. Hennessy turns the page. He has seen this ad 11 times this year. Back at the 6-week visit, your uterus has been checked. The incision has been checked. You are, physically, cleared. If you mention that you are tired, the word tired absorbs the information and releases it as normal. If you mention that you are anxious, you get the script. You don't get a question with a follow-up. The Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale isn't developed until 1987. The lipstick case clicks shut. Henrietta smiles. The smile lands. You take the small white tablet at 2, 15 inches the afternoon. The children are down. The soap opera is ending. The ironing basket has the same number of items it had this morning, which is a property it seems to have in perpetuity, like a feature. The tablet does, in fairness, do something. The crying doesn't stop, but it becomes less urgent, less insistent. It moves from the foreground to a place slightly behind it, which is a different thing than better, but is what's available. You fold a shirt, then another. The basket has opinions about this. The basket is not moved. The New Yorker runs a cartoon in February 1956 of a man at a bar ordering a Miltown Manhattan. The bartender is mixing it with 2 olives. The cartoon is on page 43. Your husband points it out at the kitchen table on a Saturday morning and laughs. You laugh too. The bottle in your medicine cabinet upstairs holds 30 tablets at 400 milligrams each. You took one yesterday at 3 p.m. The cartoon is funny because everyone knows what it is referring to. Everyone has the prescription. That is the joke. By 1957, Americans are consuming 36 tons of meprobamate per month. 36 tons. That is not a metaphor. That is a weight that could fill a warehouse, and it is going into people, mostly women, mostly between the hours of 2 and 5 p.m., which is the part of the day the pharmaceutical industry understood very well. The advertising goes to physicians, not patients. Your doctor received the brochure. He decided what you needed. You received a small amber bottle with a child-proof cap that is not actually child-proof, which your 3-year-old has already demonstrated twice. Miltown doesn't fix anything. It turns the volume down. The kitchen becomes softer, slower, and slightly muffled, like someone has wrapped it in cotton wool. The ironing basket is still full. The afternoon is still very long and very quiet, except for the television, which is running a soap opera about people whose problems have names and episodes and resolution by Friday. Miltown means you watch the soap opera without your hands shaking. That's the improvement. The basket remains. Marjorie Pelham, your neighbour 2 doors down, the one whose windowsills always have geraniums, takes hers with her morning coffee and then does an hour of vigorous sweeping that she doesn't remember starting. She isn't distressed by this. The sweeping gets done. The porch looks excellent. She mentions this to no one because there is nothing to mention. You watch her through your kitchen window while your own coffee goes cold, and you think she seems fine. She is watching you think this. You both wave. The Miltown Manhattan lands because it names a thing out loud in a way that nobody names things out loud. 1 in 20 Americans has taken it by 1956. The joke works because the joke is true, and because the joke is true, nobody has to say anything else about it. Your husband folds the magazine. You refill his coffee. The bottle upstairs has 29 tablets left. Of course, the drug is marketed as a solution to nervous tension, which is the 1950s medical term for being a woman in a situation that has no exit and no name. The physician who wrote your prescription spent approximately 4 minutes with you and described the side effects as mild drowsiness, which is technically accurate in the same way that describing a broken leg as some discomfort is technically accurate. He has 3 other patients waiting. The prescription pad is already out. The cartoon has 2 olives because a Manhattan has 2 olives, and also because everything in this decade has 2 of something: 2 children, 2 cars if you're lucky, 2 faces. The face you show before your husband leaves at 7 a.m., and the face that stays home with the baby. The tablet manages the distance between them, not the distance itself, just the distance you feel while standing in it. Sometime in the afternoon, after the tablet and the soap opera and the sweeping that Marjorie doesn't remember, there is a window, maybe 40 minutes, when the weight lifts slightly and the kitchen looks the way a kitchen is supposed to look: clean, functional, yours. You stand in it with a dish towel and feel, briefly, like someone who is fine. The feeling is real. It doesn't stay. You fold the dish towel carefully, along the original crease, and put it back on the oven handle, because some things you can still get exactly right. You go to confession on Saturday at 4. The line is short. Father Brennan slides the panel open and you can see the outline of his ear through the screen. You begin with the small things. You forgot the rosary on Tuesday. You snapped at the older child on Thursday. Then you try to describe the other thing, the one you have rehearsed. You use the word tired. You use the word sad. Father Brennan listens for 90 seconds. Then he tells you to count your blessings and offers no list. You've been working on the language for weeks. Not the language of confession, you know, that format cold, but the language of the other thing. You tried the word hollow once standing at the sink, and it sounded theatrical. You tried the word empty, and it sounded like a refrigerator. You tried the word grey, and that one came closest. But grey isn't a word you can hand to a man on the other side of a wooden screen and expect him to do anything with. So you landed on tired and sad, which are words that sound like problems he can solve, and he solves them in about 4 sentences. Gratitude, grace, the gift of the children, the blessing of a good home. He says these things the way someone reads a menu without being hungry. The Gallup poll from 1,958 will find that 49% of Americans attend church weekly. The implication being that the church is available, present, resourced. Father Brennan is available. He has a degree in theology from a school with a Latin motto. He has been hearing confessions since before you were born. What he doesn't have, and what nobody at the diocesan level seems to have noticed is missing, is any framework for the thing you're describing that isn't a spiritual problem with a spiritual solution. Tired is sloth, or maybe ingratitude. Sad is a call to prayer. The 5 stages of grief don't appear in his toolkit. The DSM-I is certainly not in his toolkit. The DSM-I doesn't have what you have in it either, but at least it's trying. You kneel at the pew afterward and say the prescribed Hail Marys. 3, which is on the lower end, suggesting Father Brennan assessed the sins as minor. The rosary, the snapping, the grey thing all bundled together and absolved for the price of 3 Hail Marys, which is the most affordable transaction of your week. You fold your hands. You look at the candles. A woman 2 rows up named Dorothy Szymanski is also saying her penance, moving her lips without sound, and you wonder if she used the word tired too and what he told her. The thing is, you do count the blessings. You've been counting them since before he suggested it. The children are healthy, the house has heat. Your husband hasn't left. These are real. They register as real. The counting doesn't fix the grey. It just runs alongside it, the way background music runs alongside a film where someone is quietly drowning. You count the blessings and the grey is still there at 3 in the afternoon when the soap opera ends and the house makes no noise. You leave the church at 4:23. The light is flat, low and November pale. The parking lot is empty, level, and quietly accommodating. You drive the 8 blocks home, you have the car on Saturdays. This is the arrangement, and you park in the driveway and sit there for a moment before you go inside. Through the front window you can see your husband's silhouette on the couch, angled toward the television. The children will want dinner in an hour. The ironing basket is where you left it. The blessings are all in there, behind the glass. You check your face in the compact mirror. The pancake is held. You look like someone who went to confession and came back lighter. You go inside. There is a woman 2 blocks over, in the greenhouse with the white shutters, who is no longer at the greenhouse with the white shutters. The story circulates at the coffee clatch in lowered tones. She is at Pilgrim State, in Brentwood, where there are 14,000 patients. She has been there 4 months. Her husband visits on Sundays. Her children are with his mother in New Jersey. You do not ask follow-up questions. You sip the coffee and you nod. You do not, after, mention how tired you have been. Pilgrim State is the largest psychiatric hospital in the country. It has its own post office. It has a farm. It has a patient census large enough to qualify as a mid-sized American city, except the residents didn't choose to move there and the streets between the buildings don't curve in the pleasant Levittown way, they just go. The whole of New York State has 559,000 psychiatric patients in institutional beds this decade, which is a number that sounds large until you remember it is also a threat. You have never been told the name of what she had. Nobody uses a name. The coffee clatch says she was having a very hard time, which is the phrase that means something clinical happened and no one is going to say what. A very hard time covers everything from a broken arm to a room at Pilgrim State with a roommate you didn't choose and a schedule you don't control. The phrase does a lot of work for 4 words. The paperwork, if there had been paperwork, would have been small, vague, and clinically inadequate. The DSM-I, published 3 years ago in 1952, contains no entry for postpartum depression. Not a brief one. Not a footnote. Not a see also. If what you have is persistent enough to require intervention, the form closest to it is psychotic depressive reaction, which is filed in the same category as conditions considerably more dramatic than crying while you hang the laundry. Your suffering gets a drawer. The drawer is the wrong drawer. Marjorie Fielding, the woman who runs the Tuesday Clatch, the one who always brings the good coffee cake with the cinnamon swirl, sets her cup down with both hands and says that what that poor woman needed was more support from her family. You watch Marjorie say this. Marjorie means it. Marjorie is also the person who 6 weeks ago stopped dropping by because the baby was sleeping and she didn't want to wake him. Support is something everyone endorses in the abstract and schedules around in the specific. The fear is not abstract. The mortgage has your husband's name on it. The car keys hang on the hook by the door he uses. The grocery account is at his bank. The custody arrangement, if any of this got loud enough to require one, would be determined by a man at a desk who has read his Helen Deutsch. So the calculation comes back the same way every time. You don't say so. You perform stability before 7 a.m. and you keep performing it through the evening news. The woman in the greenhouse performed it too, presumably, until she couldn't. You don't know when the line was crossed. Nobody at the coffee clatch knows. The line isn't visible from the outside, it isn't visible from the inside either. Most days, until you're already past it and someone is calling your husband at his office number, and your children are being packed into a car for New Jersey. You finish the coffee, someone changes the subject to curtain fabric. The conversation lifts, the way it does, into something safe and purchasable. You smile at the right moments. The smile holds. Outside, through the kitchen window, the curving street sits in the late morning sun, perfectly still, going nowhere in particular. The treatment they give the woman at Pilgrim, you have been told secondhand, involves electrodes and a current and a moment of forgetting. You have read about it in a Reader's Digest article from 1951. The article called it dramatic but effective. It mentioned, in one paragraph near the end, that some patients sustained fractures during the convulsions because muscle relaxants were not yet routinely used. The article moved on to a story about a Boy Scout in Oregon. You read the paragraph twice. You did not read it a third time. The 1953 American Journal of Psychiatry reported a 75% improvement rate for severe postpartum cases treated with ECT. 75% is a good number. It is the kind of number a doctor quotes while looking at a chart rather than at your face. What the number does not include is what you remember afterward, or whether the word for what you have lost is a name, a date, or the particular way your older child used to say orange juice before all of this started. Severe is a threshold word. It is what Dr. Hennessy writes in your chart at the visit, where the silence you have maintained so carefully through the ironing, through the dinners where food registers as texture without flavour, through the smile held 3 seconds longer than the neighbour across the yard waited for stops being enough. Severe is a small, neat and structurally final word. He writes it. Someone calls someone. The paperwork begins. The paperwork has always been waiting in his drawer. There was also insulin coma therapy, which is exactly what it sounds like. A clinician reduces your blood sugar until you lose consciousness and holds you there for weeks, on the theory that the unconscious brain resets itself like a stalled appliance. The appliance metaphor is not theirs. It's yours. You have been thinking in appliance metaphors a great deal lately, because the house is full of them and they are easier to understand than what is happening inside your body. A treatment room at McLean Hospital in Belmont, Massachusetts cost $12 to $18 a day in 1954. That is more than most families spent on a week's groceries. Sylvia Plath was there in 1954. Most women reading Reader's Digest in a Levittown kitchen were not Sylvia Plath, in any sense that the billing department would recognize. The state hospital was the alternative. You already know about the state hospital. You know what happened to the woman at Pilgrim. So the calculus is simple and terrible. On one side, the thing that is happening to you, quiet and persistent as water damage behind new drywall. On the other side, the treatment for the thing that is happening to you, which involves either money you don't have, a diagnosis that doesn't exist, or a ward with 14,000 other patients and no forwarding address for your children. A nurse named Gloria Peterson hands you a pamphlet in the waiting room of your obstetrician's office. The pamphlet is about newborn nutrition. Gloria Peterson adjusts her watch while you take it, already moving toward the next room. The pamphlet has 4 pages. None of them are about you. The 6-week postpartum visit examines the uterus and the incision. The doctor says everything is healing nicely. He doesn't ask about the bathroom floor. He doesn't ask about the compact mirror you check after hanging laundry before the children can see your face. He doesn't ask because the visit has a scope, and the scope is anatomical, and you are according to every measurement he takes healing nicely. You say, thank you. You mean it, in the way you mean everything these days, at a slight remove, as though meaning itself is something you are watching from the next room. The other treatment available, you have also heard, is the insulin one. The patient you, theoretically, if this goes the wrong way, receives enough insulin to induce a hypoglycemic coma. The coma is held for a stretch of hours. The patient is brought back with sugar. The procedure repeats across weeks. This is described, in the literature you have not read but which informs the air around you, as the gentler of the 2 options. You learn about it the way you learn about most things through Patricia at the coffee clatch, in a voice that is barely above a whisper. Patricia sets her cup down first. She does it with the careful specificity of someone buying time, aligning the handle to the right while she decides how much to say. What she says is, a woman on Birchwood Lane. What she doesn't say is the name. The name stays in the gap between her cup and the saucer, and you all understand that the name stays there. Patricia's whisper isn't protecting the woman on Birchwood Lane, she is already at the facility. The whisper is protecting the husband's job at the firm, the children at the elementary school 3 blocks over, and the version of the story that says she was sent up to recover from exhaustion. The divorce rate in 1955 is 2.3 per 1,000. The statistic is quiet, durable, and structurally load-bearing for the same reason the whisper is. The insulin procedure runs between 4 and 8 weeks, typically. You are admitted. You receive the injection each morning. Your blood sugar drops far enough that your brain shuts down its voluntary functions and takes the rest, involuntarily. The staff bring you back. You wake up in a hospital gown that is not yours, in a room painted a colour that has no name but is somewhere between green and the absence of ambition. You do this again the next day. The theory is that the coma resets something. Nobody is certain what. The improvement rates are reasonable for a procedure that involves repeatedly depriving the brain of glucose. The Journal of the American Medical Association in 1953 cites a 65% improvement at 6 months. Dr. Seikel, who developed the procedure in Berlin in 1933, wrote that the patient often emerges as a new person, which is both true and not the reassurance he intended. What he didn't dwell on is the disorientation afterward, being handed your life back in a box with the parts in the wrong order, the older child's name arriving 2 seconds late, the recipe for pot roast retrievable but slightly damaged. Of course, there are the other costs. The facility cost. The weeks away. The children redistributed among relatives or a neighbour who has agreed to help and will remember that she agreed for the rest of the decade. The husband, eating dinner alone in a house that is performing normalcy without the central performer. The neighbour across the street, who has been told something vague and believes it, or doesn't. and either way will mention it at the next gathering, in a voice calibrated to sound like concern. Back on the Levittown curving streets, the ones without sidewalks, which discourage the kind of walking that leads to the kind of conversation, that leads to the kind of disclosure, that leads to Patricia's whisper, the information moves anyway. It moves through kitchens, through casserole deliveries, through the meaningful pause when someone says the woman on Birchwood Lane is doing much better now, which means she is home and the subject is closed. You sit with your cup. Patricia has moved on to a recipe for something involving cream of mushroom soup. The conversation has self-corrected. The room knows what it learned, and will not formally acknowledge that it learnt it. The sugar they use to bring her back is ordinary dextrose. It has no opinions about what just happened. It simply works, which is more than you can say for most of the things in this decade that are supposed to help. You sit at the kitchen table one Tuesday and you do the arithmetic. If you tell Dr. Hennessy what is really happening, he refers you to a psychiatrist. If a psychiatrist puts the word depression in the chart goes in a file at his office. The file is not private. Your husband works in middle management at a firm that runs background checks. If the firm finds out, the promotion does not happen. If the promotion does not happen, the house does not get refinanced. If the house does not get refinanced, you do not have a house. You stop doing the arithmetic. You put the pencil down. You check your face in the hallway mirror. The pancake is holding. You rehearse a sentence, I think something might be wrong, and then you rehearse it again, quieter, and then you set it down the way you set down a cup that has gone cold. The divorce rate in 1955 is 2.3 per thousand. State psychiatric hospitals across the country are currently housing 559,000 patients. McLean Hospital in Belmont, Massachusetts, charges $12 to $18 a day. You do not know these numbers in numbers. You know them in the way you know which neighbour's cousin went and came back different, or didn't come back. You go back to the kitchen table. You pick up the pencil. You put it down again. You develop, instead, a parallel vocabulary. Tired. A little run down. Headaches lately, probably sinuses. You lost a few pounds, but the baby took a lot out of you, and the heat this summer is something else. These are not lies. Exactly. They are the truth wearing a coat that passes at the door. Margaret Chen, not a psychiatrist, not a social worker, just the woman 2 doors down, who has been here 3 years longer than you, stops you one Thursday at the end of the driveway and asks, with the particular careful delicacy of someone who has done this before, if everything is all right. You say, fine. You say, just tired. She nods in a way that means she heard the word fine and filed it accurately. She hands you a casserole dish covered in foil and says the children were playing so nicely she could see them from her kitchen window. Then she goes back inside. The casserole has a card tucked under the edge. It says, call me. No reason given. Just call me. You don't call. Calling means talking, and talking means the arithmetic starts again from the beginning. A 3-minute long-distance call to your sister in Chicago costs more than the pound of ground beef you bought for Thursday. And even local calls feel like openings you can't afford to leave open. The phone sits on the hallway table. It does not look like a lifeline. It looks like a liability with a rotary dial. Helene Deutsch's textbook, the one your husband's golf partner's wife saw on a shelf in Dr. Hennessy's waiting room, teaches that maternal depression is neurotic resistance to a biologically destined role. Hennessy read it in medical school. He believes it the way people believe things they learned before they were old enough to argue back. When you sit across from him and say tired, he hears a woman adjusting to her correct life. He does not hear the arithmetic. He wasn't taught to listen for it. The Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, the first standardized screening tool that would ask the right questions in the right order without requiring you to volunteer a confession, will be developed in 1987. That is 32 years from Tuesday. The pencil is already back in the drawer. On a Thursday afternoon in 1957, a woman named Betty Friedan rings your doorbell. She is conducting interviews for a magazine article. She is 36 years old, and she carries a steno pad. She asks if you have 20 minutes. You let her in. You give her coffee. She asks about your days, about your hours alone, about whether you ever feel that something is missing. You answer the way you always answer, with the second face on. But she keeps asking. She does not move on the way the other women move on. The steno pad fills up. She is not the first person to ask you questions this year. The 6-week postpartum visit asked questions too. How are you sleeping? How is the incision? Is the uterus where it should be? The doctor checked the uterus. He did not check the face. He did not look at the face in the way Friedan is looking at it now, sitting at your kitchen table with her coffee going cold, her pen still moving. She is writing down something specific, small, and not quite verbal. Not your name, not your address. Just the shape of it, the hours between 9 and 3, the particular texture of a Tuesday when nothing happens and everything is required of you, the smile that holds for a few seconds after the neighbour has already turned back toward her own yard. She is writing down the architecture of a problem that nobody has bothered to name yet. The DSM-I, published 5 years ago, does not have a page for it. The 6-week visit doesn't ask about it. McCall's doesn't print it. The problem is fully present and completely undocumented, which is, in its way, a very American arrangement. Friedan will call it the problem that has no name. She will publish those words in 1963. The book will sell 1.4 million copies in 3 years. Right now it is 1,957, and she is on your couch. And you are watching her write down things you have not said out loud to anyone. And something is loosening, quietly, like a jar lid that's been too tight for a long time. Of course, she is not a doctor. She is not offering a diagnosis. She doesn't have one to offer, there isn't one. She is a woman with a notebook asking better questions than anyone with a medical degree has thought to ask you. Meredith, who lives 3 houses down on the curve where the sidewalk doesn't start, came to your door last week with a pound cake. She stayed 11 minutes. She did not look at your face the way Friedan looks at it. The pound cake was good. It solved a different problem. You refill her coffee, you answer another question, the steno pad is almost full. Outside, the afternoon is exactly what it always is, the street empty, the television on in the house across the yard, the ironing basket in your peripheral vision, refusing to become smaller no matter how many hours you put into it. The ironing basket has opinions about your ambitions. The basket has always had opinions. She asks if you ever feel ashamed of feeling this way. You look at the tablecloth for a moment. You say you don't know what you mean. She waits. She is very good at waiting. The steno pad waits with her. You think about the compact mirror you check after hanging laundry on days the crying comes before noon. You think about the pancake foundation and the tangy lipstick applied each morning before the car leaves the driveway, because the car leaving is not a beginning, it's a starting gun. You think about the priest who told you to count your blessings and offered no list. You think about the word tired, which has served you so well, which has covered so much ground, which has never once cost you the thing you were afraid of losing. You don't say any of that. But you don't not say it either. The notebook fills. She thanks you. She puts on her coat. You stand at the door watching her walk to the next house on the curve, notebook under her arm, and the afternoon resettles around you the way it always does, quiet, specific, and entirely yours. Friedan publishes the book in 1963. She calls it The Feminine Mystique. The chapter most read by women in your zip code is the one called The Problem That Has No Name. The chapter does not contain a clinical diagnosis. The chapter does not name what is happening to you. The chapter says only that the thing is widespread, that it has a shape, and that other women feel it too. You read the chapter at the kitchen table. You read it a second time. The naming of the absence is, briefly, almost a kind of name. The book sells 1.4 million copies in 3 years. 1.4 million women pick it up, pay for it, bring it home, and read it in kitchens and bedrooms and bathrooms while children nap. 1.4 million women encounter a sentence that describes a thing they had been carrying alone and assumed was personal failure. The book doesn't prescribe anything. It doesn't offer a treatment plan. It just says, you are not the only one. That, in 1963, lands like the kitchen light coming on. The book doesn't fix the DSM, which still has no entry for postpartum depression. The DSM-2 won't arrive until 1968, and the new edition is no help. The Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, the first actual screening tool, the first standardized set of questions a doctor could hand a new mother, sits on no shelf, in no exam room, in no county in 1963. It's not really a form. It's a question someone finally thought to ask. The page is small, blank, and politely waiting. Edinburgh psychiatrists won't get around to drafting it until 1987. That's 24 years from where you're standing in the kitchen, holding the book. Meanwhile, the pharmaceutical situation continues its own trajectory. Miltown peaked in 1957. By 1963, a newer class of drugs is beginning to arrive. Iproniazid in 1957, tricyclics like amitriptyline in 1961, but the marketing logic stays the same. The drugs are for nervous tension. The nervous tension belongs to housewives. The housewives are not depressed. They are simply tightly wound, like a watch someone forgot to put down. Prozac, which will eventually become the name most associated with this category of suffering, doesn't arrive until 1987, the same year as the Edinburgh Scale. A coincidence that lands like a punchline no one wrote on purpose. You close the book. A neighbour, Darlene, comes by mid-morning. She has seen the book on your counter. She picks it up, reads the back, sets it down again with the careful neutrality of someone who has opinions about it and is deciding whether this is the moment. She adjusts her bracelet. She doesn't ask if you've read the chapter. She says the coffee smells good. You say it is. Both of you stand in the kitchen holding mugs, in the particular silence of two women who have read the same chapter and are waiting to see who says it first. Neither of you says it. Darlene's husband works at the same firm as yours. Her brother-in-law is on the school board. Her sister's husband sits on the bank's loan committee. Saying anything in this kitchen, even into a coffee mug, even with the radio on, means saying it across a switchboard with about 14 branches. The book gave the problem a shape. The shape didn't make the switchboard go away. The ironing basket is still full. The afternoon slump still arrives at 2. The compact mirror is still in your apron pocket. The hospital won't ask how you're doing for another 24 years. And even then it'll be on a form. But the book is on the counter. You've read it twice. Darlene has seen the cover. That's something. Not much. But in a decade that had nothing, something is not nothing. The screening tool arrives in 1987. It is a single sheet of paper with 10 questions. The first one asks if you have been able to laugh and see the funny side of things. The questions are simple and direct. The sheet takes 4 minutes to fill out. The tool is called the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, after the city where the 3 authors worked, and after 1987, it begins to appear in obstetricians' offices in your county. Your daughter, who was born in 1958, fills one out after her own first child. You read the questions over her shoulder at the kitchen table. You answer them in your head. The questions are not difficult, that's the thing. They ask whether you have felt scared or panicky for no good reason, whether things have been getting on top of you, whether you have been so unhappy that you have had difficulty sleeping. They are the kind of questions that a concerned friend might ask if concerned friends had been trained to ask them, which in 1958 they had not been, which in 1958 nobody had been. Your daughter circles her answers in pencil. You watch her hand move down the page. 10 questions, 4 minutes. That is the entire distance between what happened to you and what is happening to her, a single sheet of paper and 29 years. The paper, in fairness, also took 29 years to print. In 1958 the sheet didn't exist, not because of money paper is cheap, mimeographs are cheaper, but because nobody at the American Psychiatric Association sat down and drafted it. The DSM-I had been on shelves for 6 years by then, and postpartum depression was not in it, folded instead into something called psychotic depressive reaction, which is a clinical category the way a paper bag is a suitcase. Your 6-week checkup examined the uterus and the incision. It asked nothing else. Dr. Hennessy's drawer had no form for what you had. He didn't go looking for one. The drawer was small, neat, and entirely complete on the subject. Your daughter finishes the sheet. She scores high enough that her obstetrician, a woman which is also new, and worth noting, flatly refers her to someone. There is a someone to be referred to now. The referral is written on a small card. The card has a phone number. Your daughter puts it in her coat pocket, and you watch her do it, and you do not say anything, and she does not look up. A nurse named Carol, reading glasses perched at the exact angle of someone who has done this 10,000 times, slides the completed form into a manila folder without ceremony. She has done this before lunch today. She will do it again after. The folder has a label on the tab. The label has a word on it. The word is short, clinical, and printed in lowercase. Carol does not read it aloud. She doesn't need to. The label reads back. You sit at your daughter's kitchen table. Outside, there is a yard. It looks nothing like Levittown. The street has sidewalks, which sounds minor and is not. Your daughter's neighbour walks past on one, unhurried, not discouraged by the absence of a footpath from making contact with the world. Small things. The streets curve here too, but somebody thought to put in sidewalks, and somebody thought to print the form, and someone finally wrote down the 10 questions that would have taken 4 minutes of your Tuesday in 1958 and changed the entire shape of the decade that followed. You answered all 10, in your head, at your daughter's kitchen table. In 1987, the pencil was hers. You spent the night sitting at a vanity at 6:45, ironing a basket that refused to empty, and timing a long-distance call by the price of a pound of butter. You crossed paths with Dr. Spock's 627 pages, the DSM-I's 132, Helene Deutsch's 2 green volumes, and 1 cartoon in the New Yorker featuring a Manhattan with 2 olives. Somebody at McCall's invented the word togetherness. Somebody at the FDA approved meprobamate. Somebody, somewhere, in a hospital cafeteria in Belmont, Massachusetts, decided $12 to $18 a day was a reasonable rate for being told you were healing nicely. The women who lived inside that arrangement were not exotic and not far away. They were neighbours with coffee cakes wrapped in wax paper, women whose ironing baskets outlasted their patients, women who timed their crying to fit between the soap operas. They figured out what they could, in the language they had, in the rooms they were given. They kept the children fed. They walked across the yard and smiled when the smile was the only thing the yard would accept. They folded the dish towel along the original crease because some things they could still get exactly right. They wrote the letter to Akron and crossed out the second paragraph and mailed the first one. They kept the compact mirror in the apron pocket. They checked the face before the children could see it, and they checked it again before the neighbour could. They watered the geraniums. They paid for the groceries with the housekeeping money the husband left in the brown envelope on the hall table. They took the small white tablet at 2:15 and folded the shirt and folded the next shirt and waited for the soap opera to end. They are not in the history books much. They are in the kitchens and the parking lots and the backyards, in the paediatricians' waiting rooms with the 4-page pamphlets about newborn nutrition, in the long-distance calls timed to the second, in the photographs at the block party where they are smiling exactly the right amount. Their daughters would, eventually, be asked the right questions. The form would arrive. Someone would think to print it. It took a while. Let your shoulders drop. Let the pillow take the full weight of your head. Let the room go very, very still. The Edinburgh scale arrived in 1987. 10 questions, 1 sheet of paper, 29 years late. It got there eventually. Sleep well.